Okay, we're recording. We're good to go. Right. Okay, so today, I've called it the lockdown show, which I thought was reasonably amusing. You know, it's got that double meaning sense to it. But today on the lockdown show, we've got Tom King. Tom is head coach at Team KF Swords, head jiu-jitsu coach, co-head coach. Would that be fair to say?
Head jiu-jitsu coach, yeah. Co-head coach. Okay. Chris is
co-head
head
coach.
MMA coach, yeah.
You were Ireland's first, second generation black belt. Would that be accurate as well?
Yeah, I think roughly speaking, I think the first Irish person graded a black belt by an Irish black belt. So,
okay,
yeah, roughly the first, second generation and a half, whatever way you want to describe it.
Still an active masters competitor at black belt level. Still swanning around.
Yeah, still active. Yeah,
nice one. And
well, not at the moment with this thing going on now.
No, there's not too many active people at the moment, is there? No. We're actually talking about. I had Liam on. I don't know if you watched the one with Liam, but I was talking to him about stupidly kind of mentioned the European Masters, and I went, oh God, that's only a month away, or well, it's not a month away, but it would only be a month away. Like so, yeah. There's none of us going to be seeing them at any time soon. So look, let's get started on the issue of the day. Anyway, let's start on yourself and Team KF. What are you guys doing now in the during this lockdown, during the closure? Have you any plans or anything that you're getting up to?
Well, at the moment, it's just a case of keeping the kind of community going on social media, and guys continuing their own fitness regimes. There isn't anything in terms of group training, obviously, with what's going on at the moment. And it's a case of taking it, I think, week by week and see where we are. You know, it's changing so rapidly. We'll be in this thing at least another probably couple of months. So I think it's going to take it a week at a time, see where we go from there. Keep the community active is the best thing we can do. I mean, you know, in terms of kind of group online training for Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, there isn't an awful lot you can do, you know.
Yeah. Everybody's trying sort of manfully, aren't they, at the moment, to try and do stuff like that. But it's it's not like your Zumba class, right? It's not kind of
no. I mean, one thing you could do is live. I think live matches now at this point in time is much more useful. You know, I know Chris is he's given the guys homework in terms of MMA fights and stuff like that. But for MMA and for Jiu-Jitsu, it's watching live fights and seeing how your game might integrate into an actual match or a fight. I think kind of instructionals now at this point, if you don't have a body to train on, aren't much useless. You know, if you're kind of looking at, you know, hours and hours of instructionals, you can't drill it, you can't integrate it. So, you know, but looking at live matches, I think is good, you know.
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking back. I went through something similar in 2017. I was self-isolation after I got an operation on my leg. So like I was 12 weeks in a boot, you know, and I'd say about 6 weeks I couldn't get out of bed. So not the exact same situation, but similar, you know. And when I came back from that, I've been watching a lot of live matches, you know, and kind of healing up other injuries, getting the leg ready. When I came back from that, I had the best kind of run probably ever, definitely at Masters that I ever had, you know. So I think it can clear the brain. You can keep yourself, that's the advantage now, is you can keep yourself physically fit. You can watch matches, and when this does clear, and it will clear, you can hit the ground running then, you know. So don't allow yourself go to mush. You know, keep the brain active.
Yeah, you know, when people ask me all the time, they were asking me, like, people ask me a lot, like, especially beginners, like, what instructionals should I watch and stuff like that. I actually tell them, look, watch more matches and watch stuff that, because for me, I don't know, I've probably mentioned this in some recording before, but like what I always say to people is, you know, you come to jiu-jitsu, if you go to football for the first time in your life ever at, say, the age of 21, you've probably watched a couple of hundred football matches in that race. So you know the game, you know the skills, you know the fundamentals. But when you come to jiu-jitsu, you don't know anything, right? You don't know whether to stick or twist. Why am I lying on my back? How can I win from here? You know, so watching matches, I think, is a huge thing. It's a great thing for brain training. Not just the best guys either, I suppose, just watching jiu-jitsu in general.
I think jiu-jitsu, yeah, and guys of a decent level. No, it doesn't have to be kind of the world champions. But watching live matches, and as you said, comparing it to football, the amount of football that the average player would consume would far exceed probably what the average jiu-jitsu player would consume now, you know. And that's something that does it does have a positive effect on you. And at this moment in time, if you're talking about online content, that's the best thing you can be doing, in my opinion.
I think,
You know,
yeah,
either
it's
that or
definitely a
watch
good
5 hours of Danaher and put yourself to sleep. But
God, the poor guy's getting abused. I think
yeah.
Liam mentioned, the first thing Liam mentioned when I said it was like, oh Jesus, watching Danaher. Look, to be fair to that, I think he's given away an instructional there, solo training, instructional solo drilling. What I actually gave, I did give one guy. I have to say, I don't agree. I did give one guy some homework, which was shooting. So I showed him just like a couple of shot drills. I recorded some shot drills from just like trying to he was having some trouble putting his front knee down. And I recorded that from him. I said, why don't you go work on that? You know, so it's an easy drill or something like that to do. You can work on your flexibility and your mobility and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
So,
coordination, yeah.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. And yourself, how's your training going? What are you doing in this? Do you know, every email that I'm getting...
I'm like Forrest Gump. I've just been running, and I hate running. I've a metal plate in my leg as well, so every time I go for running, it hurts me a little bit more, you know. So I can see my time kind of getting slower and slower. But I've been out for about, I think, 13 or 14 runs at this stage, doing 5K at a time. Today now was the first day I couldn't actually do it because my knees weren't working and my leg wasn't working. But
just decided to give up.
I'm just going to keep doing that, recover. Yeah. I have some resistance bands. I'm kind of using them because I still have a torn rotator cuff, so I'm just kind of building that up, and that's about it. I'll keep myself physically fit through that. There's not an awful lot more, you know, that I can be doing. I don't have access to a huge amount of kind of weights or anything like that. So I think it's going to be a bit of resistance work with the bands, push-ups, pull-ups, that kind of stuff, and then running as many 5Ks as I can squeeze in, half of it cross-country, half of it on the road, until then either the knees or the leg gives up.
Something's going to give, and then then you'll have to stop. Then you can start working on the belly. Then after that, I suppose I'm the same boat. Like I'm lucky enough that I have some equipment that I just kind of scabbed out of the gym just before we got the lockdown there. So I've got a weighted vest and stuff like that at home. I built myself a pull-up bar down the end of the garden weirdly, and in a really weird moment of, you know, that's it, I'm going to build a pull-up bar. You know, I had like a Homer Simpson moment. But I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did now. But it's very hard, isn't it? It's hard to get the same motivation. I think if you're the sort of person who likes and enjoys,
I think it's more routine. You know, routine and discipline trumps any kind of motivation. I don't believe in motivation at the best of times, but I think it's routine.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. Me,
you know, get up, you know, make the kids breakfast, do their homework with them, go out for a run, so you do. You know, and I think even, you know, especially if you're preparing for competitions, it's the same kind of thing. It's routine and discipline. It will take you much further than motivation. The line memes on Facebook only take you so far. They'll only bring you part of the way.
And once they stop working, then
bring you the rest of the way.
Yeah, well, that's it. Structure,
they work
routine,
for about a week.
Yeah,
they work
and
for
then
about a week.
Off.
That's about it, I think.
Yeah, but I don't know. I heard lions don't care for the opinion of sheep. You know, if you've heard that one.
Lions spend most of their day sleeping. They're lazy bastards. So I don't know why people are using them as a motivation.
Yeah, and why they're putting them alongside sheep either, because, you know, lions and sheep never meet. That's like, you know, funny one, bears don't care for the opinions of dolphins. That's what that's like saying.
They look the part, though, lions, you have to say. They do look the part.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to put a motivational meme together, that's the animal you want to use, isn't it? It's,
Yeah.
Okay. So look, I was putting this together. I'm going to date it first, actually, a little bit. I forgot to start. Reason being, every time I've done a video since we started all this, something's changed in the news, and you look like a bit of an idiot because the situation's changed. So the scenario's changing so fast. So this is April 1st. And we're on lockdown now, probably for official lockdown. In other words, the more stringent measures for the last 5 days. Would that be right? Since last Friday?
Yeah, it's around that. Yeah, I think we're going into the third week of closure. So I think So we've closed our gyms. You guys closed on the same day as us. I know some other people didn't. Stay home on a little longer, but we closed on the Thursday. Thursday when the schools closed.
Yeah, so tomorrow will be 3 weeks of closure. obviously it's been a bit dull. So what I've decided to do is to put together a few bits and pieces for some of the old school characters. I hope you don't mind me calling you old, but I think everybody knows at this stage once you hit about Masters.
Enough people call me old at this stage. I'll have to live with it. Yeah.
But listen, let's get started. So first of all, let's go right back to the start. So you started not with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, like a lot of the elder statesmen, should we say. You started in another martial art and you worked your way into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu slowly. So tell me about that. How did you find martial arts in the first place?
Yeah, probably the first experience of martial arts, like every kid. I don't know what age it was, probably 7 or 8, doing a little bit of Kempo karate, and that lasted about a year. Didn't like that, and then about 15, I was 15. There was in Ashburn, near where I'm from. There's a Japanese jiu-jitsu school. So my older brother started that. I started that with him. And that has elements of groundwork in it. They do arm bars and they do kind of punches, chokes, throws, kicks. It's a mixed stuff, you know. So did that for a couple of years, fell out in when I was in college. And there was distractions of girls and drink and all the other stuff from college, and then came back to it afterwards, you know, started putting on a bit of weight. It was actually up to about 17, nearly 18 stone at one stage, and came back to martial arts just as a way of getting fit. And that was back to Japanese jiu-jitsu with a guy called Joe Carsley. And it was with him for a couple of years. I had keys to the dojo, and then we found a book. It was actually a book by Slagging and all that, John Danaher. So we had a book on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It was actually Mastering Jiu-Jitsu. It's a very good book. It's very old school now, but it compares Japanese Jiu-Jitsu directly to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I found it very interesting. It was all the aspects I liked about martial arts were in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I started opening up and doing a little sneaky, effectively a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class with about 2 or 3 other people. Now, if we were found, we would have been fucked straight out of the dojo because it was really traditional. I mean, if you went into another kind of martial arts club, you would have been out the door. So taking our careers in our hands, so to speak. So we kind of trained ourselves in that. We boxing gloves, did a little bit of boxing, and did just out of this book, did a little bit of grappling, tried to learn arm bars and things like that. And then probably a few months, 6 months after that, there's a guy called Gilles Grimet. He was a blue belt at the time. He's a French Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. He came into the dojo and he taught a class, and he just battered everyone. I thought this was amazing, you know. He had a pit bull on the back of his gi, so he obviously made business, you know. So he was doing the aspects that I like. So I never liked that kind of crack of swinging a sword around so much. Just like I had no interest in that, no interest in kata, like grappling, like sparring. And this is what it was all about. And he kind of explained exactly what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was, and he kind of let me know where I could train in Ireland, which was with John Kavanagh. So then probably early 2004, I headed down to Harold's Cross. And that's how I started kind of formal training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Right. Yeah, that's, I think around the time I would have been doing sort of afternoon classes there as well. So it would have been kind of similar kind of timeline. I suppose like yourself, traditional martial arts was where I started too. But did you do much sword fighting, swinging swords around? Was there much of that in your old martial arts?
No, I did the bare minimum. Like I got the black belt in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, so I did the bare minimum that was required to push me on. But I hated that, so I hated kata. I didn't see any point in that. Didn't see any point in learning traditional weapons or anything like that. I wanted to learn how to fight, and the sparring element was very small there. So although you're doing similar stuff, you're not sparring and you're not drilling, so you're not developing the skill. So that as a black belt, when I went down to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu club, I got battered, you know, which let me know that this is the correct approach. Because 3 of us went down there. 2 of us kind of stuck. Well, I stuck with it long term. The other guy stuck with it kind of mid term, and there was a 3rd guy. He saw that this was the correct way to do, but he couldn't face starting from scratch, so he kind of left martial arts completely.
I think there's a lot of times we talk about this kind of reaction, you know, when you first kind of discover it, especially if you've got that kind of if you've got some experience in martial arts before, you got this kind of first day where you go in and you get schooled by some kind of tubby blue belt, and you've got a choice of either going, stupid game, like, I don't want to do this anymore, or, maybe if he can bash me around, maybe there's something I should learn here. Yeah. The ego,
if he can do it, I can learn it. Yeah. Well, it's a test of the ego. Yeah. Because you really do have to start from scratch. Your black belt means nothing. You have to take it off and put a wipe out on. So it's a humbling experience, but it's good for you, you know. But like, I walked into a club, I don't know how many people were there. It's probably 50 people in the club. But I ended up being the first one to get to black belt, even though there was lots of people who started before me. So when I threw myself into it, I threw myself into it properly. But I'd no problem. I'd do it again. If something came up and it said, this is, you know, somehow makes Brazilian Jiu Jitsu redundant, I don't think that'll happen because of the functional nature of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. But if it did happen, I'd do it again. I certainly have no regrets. It's paid off paid off big time, you know, taking that approach.
Paid off handsomely for you. Yeah. It's like, it's certainly, it's a feature of, like, I'd say 99% of everybody who I look at when I look at a list of kind of the people who started Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in Ireland. So in other words, people who've been around the guts of 20 years now, the guts of 2 decades. But one of the features of it is, and it was actually Mickey Downs from Sligo, black belt from Sligo, trains up with Ryan Smith up there. He said it to me a couple of years ago. He said, you know, people slag off the traditional martial arts, and we could have a right go at a couple of the practices that we used to engage in, and certainly I was the same. But at the end of the day, most of the people who started this sport and started this martial art in Ireland had to take that step. They had to take that step from black belt back to white belt. So regardless of what you say about where we are right now, certainly where we came from was a point of where we had to let go of some of those old things, and it was a big step. It was a big step for your ego. Obviously, it's a big step for your your skills as well, to kind of admit, well, hey, look, what I was doing and what I've spent and invested so much time in probably isn't all that good. So it's it's a leap, I think, isn't it? A little bit.
Yeah, and certainly not everyone was prepared to make it. I think most people didn't make it, and most people weren't prepared to make it. Like, most of those guys aren't training anymore. I suppose that's the big difference now. You know, when we started, that argument was still alive between the traditional forms of martial arts and the functional forms of martial arts. And obviously you can include kind of judo, and you've obviously got Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and the various other forms. So that argument was alive in Ireland 2003, 2004, 2005. It's dead now. So nearly everyone's starting now. They're starting, maybe they've seen the UFC on TV, or they've followed it online, or most of them are aware of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So it's a different, it's certainly a different experience. People are coming straight in, they're coming fresh. Yeah, in many ways, they're going to progress quicker. They don't have bad habits and stuff like that. But it was an interesting time, because the arguments were definitely going on kind of boards and all those kind of stuff. And that argument now has been long settled. So you're in a different world now, you know.
Yeah, it's completely redundant. You don't ever hear somebody coming on and saying, yeah, well, you know, my Kempo's made for the street. Well, you do hear the odd person, the odd kind of, you know, but you remember those endless boards debates?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, but they're the same people who probably denied the moon landings. And
yeah, there's a few of them in Jiu-Jitsu as well, though, to be fair, Tom. We've still got a fair few of those swinging around. There's a few COVID-19
but you'll always have the odd basket case, but they're a bit of crack. They help you pass the time, don't they?
Yeah. To be fair. So that's how you got kind of into it, and then after that, you were involved in competition quite a bit from a kind of an early start, weren't you? From almost as soon as you kind of got in, would that be fair to say? As soon as you were into jiu-jitsu, you started to compete?
Well, as soon as there was competitions, so like early on, you probably remember there wasn't an awful lot of competitions around. There was the MMA League, which that was the very first thing I jumped into. And then, from Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, the very first, I would have been there at the very first show, which is 2005. So I'd say I was actually probably training about a year before I jumped into competition. But once I jumped in, I never stopped.
Let's have a look.
So since I've kind of started.
And would this be the first one here? Can you see that on your screen there now?
That's the first. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that's the first Irish Open. That's after waiting, I think, about 8 hours to be called for the division. So we're still
people
waiting.
don't know how good they have it. They don't know how good they have it these days. They've got a Snoop comp and
timetables. That was long before timetables. So that was the first. That was the first Irish Open. There wasn't massive amounts of opportunities to compete, because when we started, the lines were a little bit blurred between jiu-jitsu and MMA, or like Valley Judo. Valley Judo would be the more, or no holds barred being the more common term for it then. When you were training jiu-jitsu, it was assumed that you were training in MMA or you were training in Valley Judo for a fight. So a lot of the competitive outlets earlier on were things like the MMA league and fights. And 2005 is the first proper jiu-jitsu competition in Ireland. Which is slow enough getting off the ground. And then people remember as well, like the first Europeans was 2004. So
So that's people are very surprised when I say that to them. They're like, they assume like the European scene really only. When were the first world champions? 1995,
96, 95 or 96, 96, I think.
That's so if you think about it in terms of, and the first jiu-jitsu competition, formal Brazilian jiu-jitsu competition under kind of unified rules, I think was somewhere in the 1970s, or something like 1976 or something, somebody was saying, which doesn't seem, when you consider the I suppose the Gracie story and history and all that kind of stuff as well. It's
how long it goes back. It's not that long. But then their competitive outlet wouldn't have been a formalized jiu-jitsu competition. It would have been like a fight. So, and when I started, when you started, those lines were still a bit blurred. So it was assumed when I started and I was competitive that I would eventually have a fight. And I had assumed that. My coaches and teammates would have assumed that as well. Whereas now that's not the case. People can just be purely a grappler. But like I definitely know on the competition team, I was one of the first ones who maybe switched to just being purely a competitive grappler with no intention of ever fighting again. I have fought in MMA, but with no intention after 2008 of fighting outside of a grappling tournament. But that wasn't common back at the start.
No, certainly not in Ireland, was it? It wasn't. It's like you said, there was always an assumption that if you were a competitive athlete, that mixed martial arts is what you were going for. And I guess that's kind of the brand of jiu-jitsu, I suppose, certainly on this side of the country. I think the guys, I was talking to Liam about how he kind of came to jiu-jitsu, and it's a very different story, I suppose. And I suppose the Dublin centric kind of story is very much combined with MMA. But if you talk to the likes of Liam or Fergal, it was always about jiu-jitsu for those guys. It wasn't really something that they were, that was necessarily linked. There was a link, but it wasn't necessarily linked. So it's a good kind of, it's good to hear the two sides of things, you know?
Yeah. Fergal, actually, he came from Japanese jiu-jitsu as well. He had a black belt in the same organization I did, you know, so. But it's obviously, when we're talking about us, we're talking about the Dublin lads, and it was centered around probably the clubs here. The few clubs that were here were centered around MMA. But it's interesting to see that the approach was different in the provinces,
in the wilds,
in the wilds,
outside the M50. Things were different,
outside the pale,
outside the pale, huh? Yeah, but that was like, and you fought MMA. How many times did you fight?
I won professional fight. I'd probably had about 20 MMA league matches on the run up to that.
We fought in the MMA league. Did you remember?
Yeah, that's when was that, 2008? Yeah.
I'm going to try and get that while you're talking there, but go on. I don't think I haven't seen it on YouTube yet, but I'll try and find it.
I think I had 20 matches in that. I had 20 matches in that, and I managed to win them all. So I figured, fuck it, I'll take a pro fight and we see how it goes. It actually didn't start off as a pro fight. It started off as old C-class rules. I can't even remember what they were now. So it was like no elbows, and no strikes on the ground. And then it became a B class. So there was strikes on the ground now, and there was strikes standing. So it was like grand, yeah, whatever. And then it turned into an A class, and there was elbows. So it's like grand.
People don't remember. The rules changed like every week back then. Yeah.
And then the weight class kept going up as well. So I ended up fighting a middleweight. So 84 kilos. I weighed in my suit. I came in from work, suit, shoes on, weighed in on the scales. That was, it's mad carry on. Yeah.
Oh, crazy. But listen, I have to say, very enjoyable back then in many ways, and very different like to the way it is now. But there was a lot back then to that I miss now. There was a sense of kind of, there was an informality about it, and you knew everybody, which was kind of cool. I wouldn't go back in any way, shape or form, but there was a lot of fun about it. And I think we kind of touched on it earlier about that, the argument about traditional versus kind of, what would you say, more modern martial arts or more modern training methods. But there was that argument was going on, and I think we all kind of felt we were at the front of something, you know, at the vanguard of something. And I do miss that in many respects.
Yeah, which is always there's always something slightly exciting about that in any field. And certainly at that point in time, the early 2000s, it was the vanguard. You're kind of, not only in Ireland, but really in Europe, you're predating it as a formalized sport in jiu-jitsu and in MMA. So yeah, from that respect, you're part of building or helping to build something,
I think that, and that's definitely the way it felt back then, is that you were kind of out ahead of something. You were like, you were doing something new and exciting. Here, look, I have something for you here. Look, here you go. This is, in fact, look at that grainy video. This is in fact you and I. There you go. That's me nearby, as if you couldn't tell by the hair. And you can
see my amazing striking skills now.
I can see. I could see what your intention was here. Anyway. Hopefully we get split here. No. You see, I should have gone back to the center there. That was my problem. That Uchimata attempt is awful, but pretty standard, I think. That was a sweet knee, though, to be fair. I think that's the last shot I get away, though. I haven't seen this in a long time, actually. It's probably maybe...
This is over 12 years ago.
This is 2008, I just checked on there. So, yeah, 12 years. 12 years ago. 12 years and a lot of hair ago for me. It goes on like this. Maybe we should skip the close guard bit here and just move on, because this is about 2 minutes long. Oh, it's not too long, actually. Is that Mark Leonard there? I can't tell because of the quality of video, but I think
that's Mark. Yeah, that's reffing it.
Yes.
I used to think the crowds at those things were huge. I used to think it was huge,
And look at it now, yeah. There's a few people sitting around the edge of the mat.
A few people gathered around the mat. And I remember being a competitor, because the league, I'd started in the league a few years before that. I was nearly get sick on the Sunday before the competition. Just so nervous.
Yeah. I used to hate it more than anything. And I think almost the way the crowd are there now was worse than like even going to like a large jiu-jitsu tournament now. You know, the fact that they're so close, people are nearly breathing on top of you. You know, I used to hate that. I used to despise that now, you know. But
even then, that was 2008. You could go and you could get someone who was trained in jiu-jitsu, or you could get some random combat hapkido guy.
Yeah, that was a great thing about it. Almost, yeah, it was almost fun, like in that regard, you know. The end is nigh here now for Barry. Here we are. Oh no, I put you back in the half guard there, but I don't think it's going to help me too much. I'm happy to say that my guard has improved. The last time we fought, I did get DQ'd though, but it wasn't this one. This one, the armbar is on its way here now. Oh, look at that! I tell you what, I'd be pulling into the deep half guard now if it was today. It's a nice armbar though, to be fair. We'll give you credit for that. There we go. Yeah, that's 2008, 12 years ago. To be honest, it occurred to me to search it up before, and before we did that, and I didn't. I don't know why I didn't do it. And then just as we were doing there, actually, I had to do a bit of finagling there to try and find it. I was looking for my own name, but there it was under yours. You're the more famous of the two, obviously. So But that, yeah, 2008, the MMA league was launched a lot of guys though, right? It launched a lot of people. There was a lot of
guys came through that. Yeah, Roddy came through it, and Chris. He actually did that the same year there, 2008. He made his pro debut then the same night as I did. After that, yeah, Aisling Daly, she came through. Loads, just tons of guys came through. It was a funny old rule set, but like very good for building your competitive chops, like for getting you used to competing and for getting you used to the nerves. You know, it was certainly at the time as well, when you don't have a lot of competitions going on, it was invaluable to a lot of us. There's a lot of jiu-jitsu competitors, old school jiu-jitsu competitors came through that, as well as the MMA guys.
Yeah,
you know, because you
strange
that's
in many ways.
That's how you're winning those fights. There's no headshots. You're winning it with jiu-jitsu. You know. So
there was the odd match. Do you remember you used to go and you'd have these guys just trading leg kicks for 5 minutes, and the two of them would hobble off, and they'd just be lashing the legs off each other. No one will to take each other down.
And it's a draw then. It's no use to you. But I remember I think it was the first competition I did. It was back in 2005 in the MMA league, and I went to it. I'd never done a formal martial arts competition before, so maybe a couple of drunken scraps when I was younger. Very little in terms of confrontation in that respect. And I remember seeing my opponent, and his shaved head covered in tattoos, and he was lashing the pads out of it with his mate, you know. And I'm going, this guy is going to fucking kill me. Like, he is going to. I mean, I was nearly getting sick. I actually going, if I get through this fight now without throwing up, I'll be grand. But as soon as it started, as like a little switch went off, I charged across the mat at him. He turned. He didn't know what I was doing, so he kind of turned. Obviously very little grappling experience. Jumped on his back, choked him out with 6 seconds. It's the fastest punch I ever had. You know? But that kind of thing of having those nerves to that extent where you're almost kind of thrown up, and it going so well was a good platform. It was a good springboard then to push the competition on. I'd say now if he had leg kicked me and I don't know, broke my leg or something, that probably would have been a different story.
You might have a different story then at that stage, yeah.
You know? Yeah, but it shows you, like, guys.
No, so you work away there. Sorry, apologies. I'm just losing my headphones.
I thought you were interjecting there. I wanted to.
No, my headset is just running out of battery here. After telling you to take all the precautions, I'm not going to take. I hadn't taken any, so I'm going to just have to plug this headset in here just for a sec. But keep working away. Apologies.
But that shows you that whatever the guy looks like and whatever that internal voice is saying to you, it's going to come down to how well you're trained and how well you can implement that training. Like, that internal voice has been something it's very, very loud at the start when I started competing, and very negative. So telling you that you're definitely going to lose, and you listen to him, and it starts speaking to you the week of the competition, maybe the Sunday before the competition on a Saturday. But it's very quiet now. I still get it. But if I was competing, let's say last time I competed was last month, I don't hear it till about an hour before the match starts, and it's like a mad uncle. You just kind of ignore him, you know, when they start telling you can't win, and because the evidence, and if you compete enough, it'll drown that out. But I think everyone has it, and you know, especially for younger competitors, letting them know that it's a natural part of it and that it can be controlled, and that's part of the competitive experience. It's part of building as much as anything else.
Well, that's the if I could give my younger self any message through the time tunnel, it would be to kind of accept that voice as a part of you, as opposed to either trying to drown it out, which I did, which is a mistake, because if you try to drown it out, it niggles even more. It's like a needle in the back of it. But to try to understand it more than try to shut it down, or to think that it's something that only you have, that it's a normal part of the human experience, and certainly a normal part of the experience of competing at any level.
Yeah, and that seems to be the assumption, especially for novices. They'll assume that they're nervous, no one else is, or that more experienced people don't feel that. But I think being honest with them is a good, you know, you're talking about the voice through the tunnel. That's certainly something we can do as coaches to the younger generation. Let them know that that's a natural part of it. Overcoming that is a natural part of competing. And that you know the kind of positive feelings are on the other side of it, and that it does get easier. Like any skill, the more you do it, the easier it gets.
I get that. I get that voice for. I get that voice constantly, but I get it most between the scales and the edge of the mat. So I get this full on 5 minutes of like intense. Uh-oh, this is a bad idea. I really hope this guy trips, or I trip and fall on the way to the on the way to the edge of the mat here. And then once I get called on the mat, it goes away. Boop, it's gone forever. And I don't hear it till the next match, you know. But it's strange to hear other people's experiences, because some people say that like for 6-8 weeks, like in the run up to competition, whether it's competition or an MMA fight or whatever it is they're doing, they're plagued by nerves and plagued by that kind of negative voice, you know.
It's the reason why there's so many injuries the week of a competition or the week of a fight. You know, this guy can't compete. Even the last kind of, I don't know if it was, it's the Emerald Cup. We had a couple of guys who were left without matches because there was last minute kind of pullouts, guys who are injured. They're not really injured in most cases. It's the nerves kind of defeats them. So, you know, and we had a couple of disappointed competitors, but saying to them, at least they were able to overcome that. Obviously, you're very disappointed you don't get a match, and it's horrible. You've prepared for it, but you've been able to overcome at least that hurdle. And there's people who fall, and we kind of forget that there's people who fall at that hurdle. Certainly in MMA, it's more common. You get a lot of guys injure their toe, or crazy stuff happens the week of a tournament, and that is people finding.
The slip in the sauna always used to be a good one, you know. He slipped in the sauna.
Notorious.
Saunas need to get the saunas need to get grippier tiles. He slipped in the sauna. Yeah. Did he now? Oh, it was when he was cutting or something. I don't know. Something happened, you know. But I can understand it, you know. When you hear it, you obviously got
understand
like you've got a degree of kind of scorn, I suppose, especially when you're on the other side of it, when you've been training.
I still have scorn for it. I think if you sign up for something, however nervous you are, you should do it. I mean, I've never pulled out of a competition, however nervous I felt. I've never pulled out of a fight. I felt like pulling out. And certainly guys I train with, they've felt like pulling out, but not by and large, almost to a man, they haven't. They've overcome that. So I think if you put your name down, you see it through. But I can definitely understand it. I can understand it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's stuff we all, and it doesn't matter what level of competitor you are, you're gonna feel the feelings very, very similar, and everyone goes through that, unless there's something, you know, unless you're a psychopath or a sociopath, you don't have you know, a proper emotional connection to yourself. You're going to feel that way, you know. So.
Yeah, it's not a common experience for somebody to like. I know there are people out there who are super cool, like, and you look at them and you go, I know you have these emotions, but you hide them so well, and you're really good at this. Yeah, but most people, I think you can detect the degree of nerves off them, you know. And I almost think people who don't accept that, people who front up, you know, and I think a lot of people try to copy Conor, for example, Conor McGregor, you know, a lot of the younger kind of guys, especially in the MMA world, you can see them kind of swaggering. And like, you know, there's only a couple of guys in the world who have that level of swagger. And I think the more you swagger, the more it's going to catch up with you. You know, the more you're going to feel.
Well, if it's not part of your personality, I mean, if it is part of your personality, well, then fair enough. But if it's not, you know, if your degree of swagger is nothing to do with how competent a fighter you are. That's going to come down to your kind of training and your you know, the internal workings of your mind in terms of your fight IQ. So whether or not you swagger or put on that show has very little to do with the outcome of the fight. If it is part of your personality, that's fair enough. If it's not, if you're forcing it, it's going to be a detriment to you, most definitely.
Yeah,
especially you're copying someone else. You know, they're copying Conor, but they're not in his brain. They don't know what way he's processing that. You're just, you know, you've no hope of it working for you as well. As you know, anyone who knows Conor long term knows that's a reflection of a part of his personality. And for a lot of young fighters, that's not the case. And it's definitely the wrong path for them. They should really kind of try and get into touch with who they are, and use that to guide them. You know, so that's what I think anyway. For what it's worth, you know.
Look, it's if we could. Like I say, I think it's interesting what you're saying there about. I suppose I mentioned the tunnel that you you know, you could send a message back in time for. But I guess you are, especially when you're coaching and you're in a position of responsibility and a position of coaching where you can, to a certain degree, send those messages back from through your experience. I suppose from my point of view, it's always been that's one of the bigger challenges, you know, is to try to tell people, look, you know, these are the lessons I picked up, and you know, I might not be able to teach you everything about the latest outside Ashi that John Danaher and the boys in the basement are developing, but I can certainly tell you that there's universal laws that apply no matter what, you know, and there's universal laws of the human experience and the experience of competing, and they're going to apply regardless of what techniques you're using, you know. So it is we do have that capacity in some ways. It might not be for ourselves, but it's for the next guys coming up.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's move on. Let's bounce on a little bit. So when did you start coaching? You started coaching in SBG?
Yeah, I started coaching pretty early on. So active, like being one of the more active competitors. And that probably directly led to me being asked to coach classes. So I'd say around 2006 I started coaching regularly. So it's a long time ago now. Coached mainly
blue or purple belts, was it?
Blue belt. I was blue belt at the time, yeah. Purple belt, got me purple belt in 2007. So I'd say when I got purple belt, then I had a regular class, and then slowly started kind of coaching more and more. The competition side of stuff in SBG, I would have had a big hand in, because John was much more focused on MMA, rather than competitive jiu-jitsu. He didn't have a huge interest in that side of stuff. Obviously, he'd want you to do well and that, but we in terms of like competition classes and squad training and stuff like that, I would have done a lot of the coaching side of that, as well as being a competitor. So we'd use that as a window to get my own training in, and we'd a fairly serious squad there at one stage. But yeah, that went on. So coached in SBG until 10 years till 2016, and then opened up SBG Swords at the time with Chris, and then 2009, then we changed to Team KF. So yeah, long time, 14 years coaching, which is it's a decent stretch.
It's a good run, all right, yeah. And is there anything like, has it changed? Like, has your obviously your own experience has changed as you become more experienced, but do you think there's been a change in terms of what's expected out of a coach? Do you think that there's a
I think everything has evolved and everything has improved. The way we trained wouldn't. Not that it wouldn't. I'm sure there's the odd club training like that now. The way we trained in terms of a mainstream gym wouldn't be acceptable, and you wouldn't be successful now. Like I always tell that story. Like my intro class into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu was going in to a mat full of people and having the shit kicked out of me. Like that was my intro class. I thought it was brilliant, but it's not.
Yeah,
it's
there'd be a very narrow group of people. Yeah.
I think something. You're kind of into a bit scrappy or whatever, but most people wouldn't be into that, and it's also not the best way to transfer skills. So you're day one, you're going in, you're scrapping, you're being battered, you're doing what you think is right, which in most cases, a lot of cases, it isn't. A lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, some of it is counterintuitive. So if you think about that, when that's your introduction, and then it's random techniques, and it's mainly kind of fighting, you develop quite slowly. Whereas now everything is stratified. So you have beginners with beginners, and you have a syllabus. Never had a syllabus. We understand the systems. I mean, let's say the basic kind of strategy of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like the traditional strategy. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff involving kind of leg locks now, but in terms of Jiu-Jitsu, core positional style of Jiu-Jitsu, which translates gi, no gi, and MMA. Ground your opponent, take down or sweep, pass the guard, get to a top position, try and finish them. Can't finish them there, get to a better position. Can't finish them there, get to a better position, till eventually end up on their back, and you choke them or the time runs out. So that's your basic strategy from a white belt to a black belt, and you gain tools along the way. But our understanding of that when I started, it was non-existent. It was like, okay, we do the guard, and we do, not that it was non-existent, but it was woolly. And now it's very, like, it's nailed down. People know exactly what they want to do, and they're getting very good at it. And I think the kind of, not only are we, our understanding, let's say as coaches and senior players in the country, we're at a much more advanced level of our understanding of jiu-jitsu. We're much better at communicating that. But when I started the senior grades in the club, where John a purple belt and you'd Andy a blue belt, and like winging it, you know, doing the best they could, but really winging it at that stage. Of course. And some of these, you know, some of these strategies, they weren't fully fleshed out in their heads even, and they were coaching it to other people. Whereas now, it's a different world, you know. The structures that I know that you have in place, that we've in place, that all the main clubs have in place, it's a world apart. And guys can progress fairly rapidly under the way we're doing it now, in ways that they never would have before.
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on this. I touched on this with Liam, like the good luck, I suppose, that anybody has starting now, like the good fortune. But I think that's fairly obvious in terms of the grade that people see. Well, I'm being coached by a black belt versus being coached by a purple belt or a blue belt in 2005 or 2006. But it's not just about that. It's not just about the level of person. It's also the structures, as you say, that are there, and the kind of knowledge of, look, this is probably, like you said, that the first walking in on the first day and just getting smashed, which I did love. That was one of the best parts of it, was like the fact that I got in and got like mauled. It was like, oh, cool. That's not going to be that's not an intelligent way to learn anything. It's not an intelligent way to pick up skills, is to go in and be completely confused and confounded on your first day and hope you get there the next day. I always remember as well that every now and again a new technique would come up. So someone would come in with there'd be something that someone would do, might do in the UFC, or you'd see online, which was limited enough that in those days your online access was YouTube, I suppose. But and suddenly everybody would be doing it. So it was like, let's say, I think it might have been the Darce or the Bravo choke at the time. I think maybe 2008. We learned the first time I learned the Darce was like, oh, look at this. And then suddenly my entire game became about getting the Darce. No matter what happened, I would almost give up the back. Like I'd be on someone's back and I just have to get the Darce, you know?
I think the Darce, I think first time I saw Darce in the gym was around 2008. 2007, 2008, yeah, and then everyone was doing it. The first time I saw Spider Guard was 2007. I like, that's my main guard now, but I didn't see that till I was purple belt. Then there was all collar and sleeve, like kind of basic stuff. You know, even, you know, kind of what people would consider basic submissions. You mightn't have seen till you were doing it a couple of years. Whereas now, that's, if it's seen as a fundamental move, you're getting it pretty early on, you know. And the thing is, you can still have an active class now. If you kind of isolate a very kind of basic position, you can have the guys active and doing the right stuff, and sweating in a class, but not picking up bad habits and not injuring anyone. So that alone, it's very different. And sometimes we forget how much it's come on. I think that's one thing I remember about those days, is being injured quite a lot. Like always getting like hurts, like and not in the way that I am now. Like, so if I get injured now, it's because it's kind of progressively come on. So it's like, because you're getting old, Barry. That's where you're getting injured.
Yeah. But even the same with the guys, even with the younger guys, where
kind of, you know.
No, surely not. Maybe only by a matter of months. But I think, you know, the guys, even the younger guys, like kind of guys who are 25, 26, they're going like, my back is kind of hurting and stuff like that. And it kind of comes on them progressively. But I remember like so many times having like arm locks like lashed onto me, like with no time to tap in the middle of training. Guys like squeezing my neck like crazy in mad positions. It just doesn't happen anymore. And I think people are generally kind of, the classes are obviously better coached and better supervised, but also people kind of, that that level of technicality, and it's like, look, it's not about winning, it's about developing your technique. That's kind of a more prevalent attitude, I suppose, other than just getting on and squeezing the head off each other, you know?
That's definitely, yeah, it's a sea change. And it'd be a strange situation if it didn't evolve. But, you know, I haven't seen that evolution from the start. It is, it's kind of good to look back at the progress, and then that'll continue to progress. Where you get people who've never known anything but Brazilian Jiu Jitsu now, and those guys are starting to progress towards black belt. Probably the first of those guys starting to progress to black belt, you know, and then they'll coach people who've been coached by someone who's never known anything but that system, you know, but the correct way of doing things.
I remember around 2011, I had a guy over, a very good guy from Checkmat, a guy called Nivaldo Oliveira, right? And he was competing very heavily at the time. He lives in, I think, Dubai or Abu Dhabi now at the moment. He came in and he was a very nice fella, and he taught us some super cool X-Guard, which was my thing, so it was great. And but we asked him, it was like, how many black belts are in your club? And we thought he was going to say something like, you know, oh well, we got 6 or 7, and he had something like 40 black belts in his club. And that was the first time we'd heard of a black belt who was maybe in his 50s or in his 60s. Or even in his 40s, because at that stage, black belts probably seemed so unattainable to us, or so far off from the level that we were at, that it was crazy. But what was even crazier was that there were people taking up this martial art in their 40s and going on to black belt. And I'd seen that in Taekwondo. That was something I had seen, but it was, I'd always envisioned it as this kind of, not to insult anybody who has a Taekwondo black belt in their 40s or 50s or anything like that, but it was always seen as like, well, it wasn't like a serious belt. It was just like something, they got given it because they showed up, you know, and it was almost like a sympathetic thing. But now you meet black belts who are in their 40s and 50s, and you go, who have started very late, and they're savages. And you go, oh no, this is like, it's a little bit different. But I remember I couldn't conceive of that. And in 2011, it was like, yeah, that was mind blowing to me, you know. A black belt in 2011 to me was like Saulo Ribeiro, you know, and no one else, or that guy, Nivaldo, you know. Tom, have we lost you?
Hello?
I think we might have lost your connection. Are you still there?
No,
Tom?
no, you're back.
We're back. Okay, we lost you for about 5 seconds there.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's breaking up a little bit. I think you're back now.
A little bit patchy. That's okay. I have you now.
Yeah.
I think it's all the home office people on their Zoom meetings like us, trying to figure each other out.
On the internet, yeah. But I think one of the brilliant things about about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, let's say, as opposed to some of the other functional martial arts, like you take Thai boxing, there's no way you're starting Thai boxing at 40 and kind of going to compete hard, or very unlikely you're going to compete hard. You're going to be broke up, you know. So Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is different in that you could start it at a later age, and you can be competitive, and there's a division for you. Or if you want to drag out your competitive lifespan, you can do that as well. You know, which you can't do in a lot of martial arts. So even judo and stuff like that. Judo is very kind of hard on the body, isn't? And certainly Muay Thai or boxing are very hard on the body in a way that Brazilian Jiu Jitsu isn't. So you can have a longer competitive career, or you can start later and you can compete, you know, certainly against people your own age and belt level for a long time, which is that's part of the beauty of Jiu Jitsu, I think, you know. Like, for example, for us, I mean, if we were football players, we'd be on the scrap heap now. At least we can go and we can compete, and that helps us as coaches. So I think if a coach doesn't compete, it's very difficult for them. It's very difficult. Just go on talking. It's very difficult.
I'm glad you just had I just had an intervention there from my daughter as well. She just came in there in the back. I just had a moment there too. So, that's actually something that kind of comes up a lot. Is competing at masters level. Like, I never saw myself as doing that. I always thought that I would be done and dusted, I suppose, in my 30s. But then, I got a new lease of life there a couple of years ago, and just it's definitely, it's something that I suppose you get to a certain age where you kind of say to yourself, you know, I'm probably never going to improve any more than I'm certainly never going to get any quicker, or I'm I'm not going to get more flexible or more mobile or anything like that. But I can. So I guess you can also say to yourself, well, I'm never going to improve either. But I think you can improve. You can certainly improve even at our level.
Can improve. Yeah, absolutely can improve. I've added a lot of, certainly last year, 9 tournaments last year, I was able to add in a lot of new, like, additions to the systems that I use to attack. Like, if a new kind of footlock, I roll into a footlock, it's like a bastardized Imanari roll into a footlock that I was never able to do before. I've added that in. I've added a lot of new kind of spider guard stuff in. I'm certainly technically better than I was. I'm slower than I was 5 or 6 years ago, but technically better. And I think you definitely can. And for me, it's a case of, so I can, integrate these attacks, pull them off against other black belts in competition, and then coach it. I think if you don't do that, you risk the run. You run the risk of stagnating. Where are you pulling your information off? Okay, you can be rolling with guys down the gym, and that's fair enough. Some coaches don't do that. Even some Brazilian Jiu Jitsu coaches don't do that. So their Jiu Jitsu is stagnating. And even if you're competing at an older age group, obviously you're not competing at the cutting edge of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, but you are competing, and you're competing against people who are, black belts, and you can integrate new techniques and pull them off against a resistant opponent, against a trained resistant opponent. That puts you in a much better position to coach those systems to your students. And if you're not doing that, what are you doing? In my opinion, I always get in trouble when I'm on these things. People kind of
get their goat up. No, I mean,
that's what I think, and people can argue with it. I think if you're a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach and you're not rolling and you're not competing, you're stagnating, and what you're offering your students is not as good as otherwise could be. So there you go, and that's what I think. And if someone disagrees, that's fine. That's sure there isn't a world full of people who agree and disagree.
I suppose there's many ways to skin a cat, and I suppose a lot of people would say, well, look, I've been there and I've done that, and I've done my competing, and I'm done and dusted now, But not for me. I've definitely, I suppose, it's definitely given me a lot more of a reason. Like, I always rolled and I always trained, so I never, aside from a period where I couldn't physically do it, I've always rolled with all my students, and I always try and train with them as much as possible. But certainly in the last few years, there's since starting to compete again, I've said to myself, well, now I'm rolling, but there's a purpose to the roll, as opposed to just getting out there and just putting the rounds in, and kind of, and I think, you could say as much as you want, like, well, I'm a bit older now and all that kind of stuff. And you can kind of line up the excuses as much as you want, but at the end of the day, they are still just excuses, and you have to drop the ego a little bit as well, and understand that you're not going to be as quick as the 25-year-old guys.
Yeah, of course.
Right now, and all that kind of stuff, but it's good fun, right? It's enjoyable.
It's a funny thing in martial arts, and I don't know, is it changing or is it not changing? I don't know. But like, if you were a boxing coach, you wouldn't be expected to go toe to toe with the 20-year-old pro. No matter how good you were in your competitive prime, like a 40-odd-year-old coach wouldn't be expected to go. But somehow in martial arts, it's seen as, if you're 40 or 50, you should be able to take on everyone. It's simply not it's not the case. It shouldn't be the case. I think if you're not coaching people to be at a level where they're going to at some point supersede you, you're maybe not doing as good a job as a coach as you could be doing. I look at my friend Alan over in the UK, and I mean, he's 40. What is he? 45 now. He still rolls with students, but I mean, he's world champions there. Obviously he's not winning all those rounds. He's still rolling. He's still rolling. And this expectation that a 40, 45, 50-year-old coach should be able to, when we're coaching guys we're sometimes coaching kids from the age of 6. So I mean, they could be a black belt by 19. They have a competitive career, then they're in their mid-20s. You're telling me a 50-year-old coach should be expected to beat them? That's not the case, And
but you're right there passing on certain lessons though too, right? You've got other lessons that you can teach them too, even if you're not winning, right? So you've got those.
Well, it's not about win. I think the whole winning thing and the whole competition thing, like that, I think that's a separate side. as in you could have, you know, a good sports coach who maybe didn't hit the highest levels, or who did, but like their actual execution of the game is probably less important as their ability to communicate that. Now, kind of, you're still kind of at 40 at a point where you can be competitive with a lot of guys on the mat. And that's great, but you're more their kind of sparring partner then at that stage, and they're learning a certain amount off you at that stage. I think the coaching aspect is a skill set that lies maybe outside of that, and it certainly can be fed by people remaining active. So I think you learning techniques and going to a competition, being able to implement them and the experience of that, you're able to kind of pump that in, especially to beginners, and keeping up the newer aspects of the game, you know, like all the lapel guard and kind of worm guard and all that kind of new stuff that's coming on board. I think being sharp with that, as sharp as you possibly can, the onus is on you. I mean, if you were teaching maths, you couldn't rely on a curriculum you learned 10 years ago. You'd have to keep up to date with the stuff. And I think from that aspect, it's very important. And then you need to roll with your guys in order for that to be executed. But the skill of being a coach, that communication, is something that lies outside of you being able to smash everyone on the mats. You know, because that's that for everyone, that's going to go, for absolutely everyone. You know, even the guys who are 20 and think they're invincible and indestructible, that's going to go eventually. But that skill of being a coach, as you mature, as you kind of grow older, you increase in that skill, that's your second almost lease of life, you know.
Yeah. I think the ability to be able to communicate something, and I think there was something that I'm going to have to try and hark back to the book now, but it was actually directly in relation to boxing. It's funny you mentioned boxing, but it was about the amount of world champions who went on to coach, and even when they were coaching an extremely talented person, and how actually unsuccessful they were. So it was mentioned in Sugar Ray Leonard and his coaching career, which was, by all accounts, a bit of a disaster. He went into promotion and management, which suited him far better. But it's almost like there's a saying, I think, in boxing, which is that champions don't make coaches. And it's almost like the more successful you are, or the more easily the game comes to you, the more difficult it is to communicate what you've learned to others, because it's come so easy to you. It's been a natural thing. You didn't have to think about learning it. It just happens. So I think there's definitely an element of that, I think, as you get older as well, isn't there? Where
definitely an element of truth to that.
Yeah. I have to understand this from an academic level, because I can't, you know, maybe not necessarily do it, you know, or no, not necessarily, not that you can't do it, but I certainly can't, like, I'm not going to spend months and weeks learning lapel guard for my own benefit. I'm going to have to learn it for my students' benefit, which is a different prospect, you know. It kind of maybe develops maybe a bit of an understanding without necessarily having to do it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, understanding the kind of fundamental principles behind it, so at least you can explain it, and at least you can defend against it. And I think anything that's kind of mainstream, that if you are a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu coach and you do have students who compete, which they should by and large be competing, that the onus is on you to understand these things. You know, and no one is going to be able to go into every single level of detail in every single aspect of the sport. Definitely being up to date with it, you know. And certainly there's a lot who are and there's a lot who aren't. So you want to be on the, well, definitely me.
You want to be on the right side of that, right? Yeah. Do you tell all your students to compete, or do you make them, or force them, or do you encourage them in any way, or do you?
No, I don't make anyone do anything. No, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in. I don't know what do you call coercion. Although people would say I'm brutally coercive. Yeah, it's not really something I do. You know, it's more, you know, I'd kind of recommend it. But no way would I force people to compete. And there's always a room in the gym for people who definitely don't want to compete for one reason or another. But I'd encourage it, and the reason I encourage it is not for the kind of glory of the club or whatever. It's for the development of the student. I see how much competition helped me. You know, I wouldn't be as good a player I am, or as good a coach I am, if I didn't compete. You know, or if I didn't compete as much as I have competed. And I think even if you don't compete that much, it's it's one of the kind of crucial tools to developing an understanding of the game and being able to develop quick at it. In almost every case that I've ever trained, or I've trained with kind of thousands of people over the years, it's the competitors who kind of grasp it quicker, progress quicker, stay at the game longer, all those kind of benefits. And that could be a guy competing maybe twice a year, 3 times a year. It doesn't have to be every week. But I encourage it. But even forcing people, I think lead by example, encourage, and that seems to be that works fairly well for us. I mean, a fair portion of our guys do compete. But no, there's definitely just not, like, I in anything in life, I don't believe in that kind of pushing people too hard. And I think if you do it the other way, if you do an approach through leading by example and by encouragement, you're going to get a higher uptick on it anyway, and it'll have better long-term results, I believe.
What's me dad would say, you catch more flies with honey than you do with shite, which is probably applicable.
That's one way to put it. Yeah,
I've got plenty of those. Don't worry. Yeah,
the carrot and the stick would be the traditional way, the traditional explanation, but that one works as well.
Yeah, there you go. But like, it is something that I think you note from competitive jiu-jitsu clubs, certainly around Ireland, that you do note that the more successful ones, or certainly the more, I always think a good sign of a good successful jiu-jitsu club isn't necessarily medals or anything like that. I always look out and I see the range of people who are competing from the club. So in other words, it's not just the 20 something.
Yeah, that's always a good symbol. I mean, if you have a broad kind of spectrum of people from all walks of life, all age groups, big women's team, plenty of juveniles competing, that's a good sign, and that's ultimately, that's what it's about. The kind of approach that we took when we opened the club, myself and Chris, when we sat down, was to make is a big part, as it is with something like the GAA. It's a big part of what they do, but it's not the only part, and it's a big part, but it's not the most important part either. It feeds all the other parts. But being a community, and this crisis, like this pandemic, you're really seeing those clubs that are true communities, and you'll see those clubs that aren't, and I think you'll see it on the other end when a lot of the clubs that aren't proper communities in the let's say the GAA sense of the word probably won't be standing at the end of this. I think the ones that are, have developed over time, have grown organically, and people feel really part of something, they're the ones who'll be, I think after this, in one sense, even they'll be as strong or stronger after it,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what your experience has been. Ours has been incredibly positive from the people who are out of training. So like, I've had probably more emails, more messages from our members about this than I have about any other subject, and I'm talking about supportive messages. So I haven't had a glut of emails, and there's actually a girl who does all the membership stuff for us, Teresa, and her experience in the last couple of weeks has been of people offering support, help, expressing worry and concern about whether we're going to be back, and it's really kind of brought to the fore, like the things that you're saying, that this is about, it's okay, this is how we make our living, but it's more than that. And there's obviously things that I don't know about you, but there's other things I could be doing that would be financially better for me.
Oh yeah, of course.
But I don't do those. Yeah, I don't do those. I do this because I love this, and hopefully that love, I think, and that not to go too what would you call it? Not to go too Russell Brand on it, but the love and the kind of energy that you put into it, I think is reflected in the kind of the sort of community that you build. So I think if you are kind of in there for the money or for the glory of it, you'll get kind of money seeking or glory, people interested in glory will come to you, that's kind of you'll attract that type of person. But if you are interested in it for the community of it, and you're in there for the love of the sport and for the enjoyment and the pure enjoyment of what you do, I think you get people, you attract like-minded people, and in times of
Yeah, I
crisis
think
like
so.
this, that's
Yeah.
what comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like kind of my experience of it is that very much mirrors what you're saying. I was getting so many messages to support, I thought I was fucking dying or something. I was going, like, I'm grand. I'm here. You know. But yeah, it's been nothing but kind of positive, and the team is in good spirits, the community's in good spirits, and that's all. It's all been very positive. And that leads me to be very positive for the future. And then, you know, that'll be reflected as well when we open up. If there are this kind of financially, there's plenty of barmen out there, or restaurateurs, or, you know, if anyone's struggling the other end, that'll be kind of paid back from the community, from us, you know, in terms of, you know, if someone's struggling to get back on their feet, the support will be reciprocated to the members of the community in terms of allowing them to train, even if there's a bit of hardship there. So
and there's going to be a lot of hardship now, right? There's going to be an awful lot of people.
It's not the way everyone operates, but I think people who don't operate to where traditional different connotations, but where, let's say, what we would understand a martial arts club to be, you know, the entity we would understand it to be, is very different to what other entities are out there, without kind of putting my foot in it.
Don't worry, Tom. You put your foot in it plenty in the past. We'll all make our own assumptions from that.
I should give up. Worrying at this stage, you know. But I have to be very careful, because people, there's always a sway of people going that somehow I'm bitter. I'm just outspoken. I just say what's on my mind. That's the only difference. I say the only difference between me and maybe some of the other guys is, if I've something to say to you, I'm not saying you now, but if there's something to say about someone, I'd say it to their face, or say in public. Whereas everyone else seems to be talking kind of behind people's back. I don't really like that, talking behind people's back. If there's something positive to say it. If you've something that's not as positive to say it, and, you know, deal with it. So, but I think going back to the kind of community-based martial arts, everything I kind of imagined the martial arts club to be, we've built that community. One way or the other, that community be standing at the end. And I think some of the other maybe entities in the leisure industry that involve martial arts are going to struggle. So
I think it's going to be interesting times anyway. You know, the old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. I think we're living in.
Yeah, we're living in it, with the Spanish flu revisited, isn't it? It's a kind of historical thing we're living through. I've never experienced anything like it. I'm sure you haven't either, not to this degree. It's been straight out of a movie, I suppose, in many respects. And very much so.
Oddly enough, I'm actually reading a book at the moment, and I picked it up for the first time in a long time. My wife bought it me for Christmas, and I put it down and picked it back up again. It's Bill Bryson. Did you ever hear Bill Bryson?
Oh yeah, no, I read a lot of his stuff. Yeah.
So he's got the body, a user's guide. So it's kind of a half, you know.
That's his new one. Yeah, that's the one he brought out at Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm reading, and lo and behold, I pick it up 2 nights ago for the first time in probably a month. And what's it on? Viruses. Straight away, I was like, Jesus Christ. Yeah, and everything I'm turning, it's like every time it's like having a sore thumb, you know, you hit it off everything. Everything I'm looking at, I'm going, whoa, oh my God, you know, that's going to change. This is going to change, you know. And oddly enough, the chapter that I read is straight out of the playbook that we're reading now, you know, viruses jumping from bats and from people eating wildlife and all that kind of stuff to where we are right today, you know. But yeah, I think everything's going to change. I'm actually at the one of my students, I don't know if you know C, she takes a lot of the photos, and C Gordon, she's got a lot of photography of that we would use at the Irish Opens, and even from my club. But she put up a lovely quote from Nick Cave, who said, you know, we're going to maybe this sense of community that we're all feeling, maybe a little bit, we'll all come out with a greater appreciation and maybe a greater creativity, you know. And then I switch on Twitter, and it's just guys going on about 5G masts.
Yeah, but
how much cocaine they're going to do in September.
I think the noise of those people is amplified, though. the basket cases, and it's entertaining in a way, but definitely on social media, the noise of them people is amplified above their standing. I think the majority of people are much kind of quieter. And one thing you have out of this is you have a funny little socialist state going on at the moment, and it's definitely an experiment in terms of, the private hospitals have been nationalized, and
well, they've been nationalized to an extent. I mean, we're paying for it. They're getting their price.
Well, yeah, you have to pay for everything. There's no such thing as a free lunch. The NHS has been paid for, but I'm just saying in terms of you basically have a socialist state. I mean, there's government supports there. It'd just be interesting to see. It'll be an experiment for them in terms of how well or not a lot of these measures help or don't help. So
yeah, I think I'm not sure. I'm after seeing something there about an economic stimulus package in Canada, which was essentially giving, not to go too far into economics and all that kind of stuff, but it was essentially giving people a universal basic income.
Yeah, the States are doing something very similar. They sending a check of €1,200 or something to your bank account.
Just to everybody. So that's universal basic income, which is like.
Well, that's what it is. That's what it is. And obviously here it's to a lesser degree, but they brought in that emergency COVID payment. It's not exactly the same thing, but you're going to see whether whether it'll work short term or won't work short term, or what.
No, that's been a major social experiment that I think this was it Finland, or a certain proportion of people in Finland were getting it as a part of a kind of a social experiment or something like that. Essentially, everybody was getting €1,500 a month, and it was going from there. But that's what we could be looking at. Like, I mean, it's not inconceivable that this time in 3 months' time we'll all be getting like a check into our account guaranteed, and that will be our income just to try and keep the economy going. And it would suit the banks, it would suit everybody.
I suppose the economic side is one side, but then obviously, versus the virus, everyone is in it together. There's a sense of I suppose underlying solidarity there that you might necessarily always have. It's certainly not a good thing, and it's certainly not something that you want to be going through. But it's I think it'll have repercussions in the way people think, as everything does, and every kind of major moment does. Well, hopefully we can come out the other side without too many people dying, I suppose is the main thing, or having major health complications.
I mean, we've been, you can talk as much as you want about how terrible it is your jiu-jitsu club is closed and all that kind of stuff. And I just thought I'm sure Gordon Ryan online. I'm sure you don't follow him or anything like that, because
I don't follow him. No, he's just a bit. He's a great jiu-jitsu player. He's just a bit of a cock, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. That's it. That's basically it. Yeah, great jiu-jitsu player, bit of a cock. We could just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But there's him, and I suppose a subset of people, I suppose, in Ireland who would think the same thing. It's like, well, so what if a few old people die? But of course it's not.
No, it's not. Well, it's not just old people. This is why I kind of have a problem with them categorizing people into, X amount of people died, but sure, they were old. Like you're talking about a 70-year-old could have 20, 25 years of life left. They might have longer than you.
It's not old anymore. Yeah, it's not old anymore.
You might go out and get hit by a car going to get your groceries in the morning. Who are you to say that person shouldn't have it? Or they've underlying health issues. One, they might be manageable health issues. They might be able to live until they're 80 years of age. So again, what's the difference there? Or
it might be asthma. It might be something extremely mild.
Something like that, yeah. Or if it's not, like, let's say it's a terminal illness they have, and they've been told they have 10 months of life left. That's the most important 10 months of their life with their family. And you're going to tell them, you're dying anyway. Like, what the fuck? If that was you, and that's what a lot of these people don't think, your Gordon Ryans and the other people who are carrying on like that. What if it was you? What if it was your family? It shows, I think, a lack of, it's first of all a lack of thought. I think in that's the kind of primary reason for it, but it's a lack of empathy as well, because they're not seeing themselves in the shoes of people who are maybe sick or dying, or even the health workers who have to deal with this carnage. So yeah, I think if anyone's doing that at this stage, like, I wouldn't have a very high opinion of that. I think they should cop themselves on and just row in behind everything else. I do not want to have my gym closed. I do not want to be running up the fucking road like Forrest Gump with a metal plate in my leg to the point where my legs are my knee. I don't want to be doing that. I do not fucking want to be doing that, but I'm doing it because it has to be done. You know, and then there's people who go, no, you know, forget what the government says, forget what society says, forget what the science says. I'm going to fly in the face of that and go around fucking infecting everyone. Like, you know, like just engage your brain for a minute and think about what you're doing, you know. But that would be my opinion on that particular.
Good God, I ran 5K myself last night, and it was my second time running in probably 3 years. My first time running was the week before in 3 years. And I was about halfway through, and I was actually getting a reasonably good time. I was like doing like good pace, you know, of the polar pod runner thing in my ear, you know, and I'm hearing it. And I'm going, oh yeah, I'm not doing too badly here. And about halfway around, I went, I fucking hate this. And it just, my whole attitude to the run changed. It's like, I hate this. I was like, oh, and it's immediately I started getting slower. So my motivation just went downhill. It's just get fucking home, Barry. Good God. And don't even get home quick. Just get home painlessly.
Yeah, it's just so fucking boring. Like, never once, right? I don't know how long I'm doing jiu-jitsu. I'm doing jiu-jitsu, what? I mean, I started it kind of grappling 2003. So whatever that is, 17 years, guts of 20 years. Not once ever have I stopped in the middle of a roll and gone, this is boring. You know, I might have been smashed. I might not be particularly enjoying it, but whatever else is not boring. Like, you know.
Oh, geez,
but,
yeah, you can never accuse it of that.
Yeah. No. And some people, that's their main form of exercise. I shouldn't say too much because my wife, his main form of exercise is running, so she'll be giving out to me over this. But just compared to grappling, it's I don't know how people run marathons. Forget about 5K you've done in 28 minutes, 30 minutes. Like, there's fuckers out there running marathons. What you must be able to switch off your brain completely and just it be a blank slate. I don't know how people do that. You know?
It always fascinates me how people do that. And swimming for like long periods, like swimming. Hey, it's a swim. Hey, it's swimming down the end of the pool.
Yeah.
Hey, I caught the ball. That's fine. I can do that. But face down in the pool.
I find swimming very boring, but I found that very good for recovering from my broken leg. And I swim only for 20, 30 minutes at a time. But I found that very good. It was a bit the only thing I could do when I came back. So, yeah, but no, I'd agree with you. It's kind of, and you can't even have your headphones in when you're swimming.
No, yeah, it's just, I just find it, yeah, it's an unusual one. Like, and for me last night, like even running, I had to have like a target. I couldn't do it. Like I used to do it a lot actually. I almost kind of enjoyed running for a while. But it was like, I don't know how, I can't reconcile that version of myself with today, because last night it was like, good God. But like I was trying to get a time. I was like, boop, and I was getting every 500 meters. I'd set a thing to give me my time every 500 meters. So I was like, okay, what I'll do tonight is I'll try to beat that 500 meter time every 500 meters. And I did that 5 times, and after that, I didn't give a shit. It was like, oh, so what?
Can't even bring yourself to care. Yeah.
I was there. I couldn't. No, I'm sorry. I want somebody to try and choke me.
I usually lash on a podcast and focus on that, and then kind of try and get into a pace. That's about the only way I can get through. But I'll still be doing it once we kind of legs are okay tomorrow. I'll go out and do it, because when this finishes, I want to be in decent shape. I don't want my grappling to be responsible for bringing me back to a level of fitness that I should have maintained, because that's going to detract, in terms of being able to compete again. That's going to probably shave a couple of months off it. So God knows when the competitions are coming back, because I think we'll be back a good while before competitions or fights.
I think we're looking at, like, look, I'm again, I'm not an expert, but just basically going on from reading the experts, and certainly listening to that podcast with Jerome Fennell, Lachlan Jones podcast with Jerome Fennell, that I think September is a very optimistic target date. And
I think we take it month by month. It's definitely going to be a few months. Who knows? We don't know how this thing is kind of fully behaving yet. I know there's good signs coming out of China, whether China are telling the truth or not. There's good signs coming out of South Korea. whenever we do get back,
I have a friend living in South Korea, and he told me today they were never on lockdown. So they were never in the state that we're in now. But what they have different to us is that they've got a very pliant kind of society. They've got kind of a very
dictatorship,
yeah, and I think the not certainly not. It doesn't apply to all Asian countries, but certainly in Asia there is that kind of filial kind of you know, the elders kind of dictate what everybody else
do what the emperor says.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of that's still alive today, very much in their culture. And so he was saying that they're kind of quite compliant in terms of, so when the government said, look, stay 2 meters away from each other, they didn't have to. They were
doing it. Yeah. I know people are bitching and moaning about Ireland, but it hasn't been bad. You know, it's certainly not compared to the UK. I think the UK is heading for. Certainly, London is heading the way Spain is and Italy. I don't see any other way. You know, the tubes are still packed now. And not only that, but they seem to have cut down the amount of tubes, so there's more people packed onto the trains. Which
which is a funny,
very strange.
Thing. I read something about that. Yeah, very unusual.
Well, like for you're talking about kind of competitions getting back online. Like, you know, when's the next fight going to be in the UK, or when's the next jiu-jitsu competition going to be? Like, I was watching the IBJJF because you were talking about the European Masters. I'd registered for that, and I booked flights, and I was looking at it like, and you could slowly see kind of day by day that the IBJJF were cancelling more and more competitions, but they're gone. Like, it's blank till the rest of the year. So
they haven't scheduled anything. Like, and obviously, like I've a bit of insider stuff on that, you know, through running the Ireland National, and like it's just I think the way even if every international body, I suppose, is looking at it probably this way, is like, even if the country in which we are holding the event is relatively stable, whether that's the United States or Ireland,
you've all the international competitors coming in, exactly. Of course. Yeah.
So how can you
how can they?
How can you hold an international event in which you're going to possibly be inviting 100 or even just 20 people from a highly infected country, and you could be sparking another outbreak? And again, like, that's something that's really concerning, is that, you know, we could potentially be looking at this for another year, you know, of ups and downs, and you know, that could be
and whether there's going to be a second wave, or whether there's going to be a third wave, or is it going to burn itself out, or, you know, the thing is, it's like, obviously it's a new virus. They don't know. That's the thing. Like, we don't know when the club's going to be open, and that, for us, that's a very big impact in our life. But I suppose the bigger picture is they don't know how this virus is behaving. They don't know, you know, how long it's going to be bouncing around for. It only popped up in November of last year. So, you know, we've no immunity to it. We don't know how it behaves. You know, it's there's a lot going on there. And definitely kind of normality from a point of view of us getting back and training and competing like that. That's I think we'd be back training maybe in you know, in a different way at the start. We'd be dipping our toe in the water. And I think those international competitions could be next year before you see another international competition. You know?
Yeah, it could literally be. I mean, international sport, or that kind of. I think especially in a sporting environment where you've got amateurs coming in who can't be screened or controlled in any way. Professional competition might be on as soon as the summer or anything like that, you know, so where they've got some level of control of who's traveling. But after that, who knows?
It's hard to know as well, because if you go back about 3 weeks, I remember we're closed 3 weeks tomorrow. So let's say that week we closed on the Thursday. I remember the Tuesday saying it to someone, going, I'm worried about this thing. This might close. It's like, that was only on the Tuesday. And they were going, no, you're mental. There's no way. Like, and by the Thursday, things had changed that much that, you know, everyone was closed down. Schools are closed down, you know. And then if you went back a couple of weeks, like from that, you know, people's mentality and people's understanding of it has changed so rapidly, and I think it's going to keep changing, or as our understanding of it grows. So it's a case of battening down the hatches and just weathering the storm, isn't it? You know, and we'll see where we are.
Yeah, seeing it out. Get yourself a good running habit, or get yourself a good drinking habit. I think those are the two options available.
Well, one's bad for your knees, the other is fucking bad for everything else. I think if you can if you can be the type of person who can have a couple of bottles of beer in the house the weekend, which I kind of, with a little bit of discipline, a lot of discipline, that's what I would be. You know, Chris always slags me about my beer habit. I like craft beers, you know. So he calls them the devil's scrotum. Yeah. Anyway, so I like a couple of craft beers, but I think if you can be disciplined and limit that to a couple of bottles of beer the weekend, you're grand. But Jesus Christ, you could easily slip into smashing it out of it every
like
night.
every day is the weekend around here these days.
Yeah,
It's
well,
like,
it psychologically feels like the weekend, especially when you're not used to being in the house and sitting around. And the only time you do be in the house sitting around is the weekend, and you maybe have a glass of wine or a bottle of beer. That's an easy habit to slip into, and you slip into it now, you might not get out of it. You know, and then you have the problem of, you know, you've the problem of an alcohol dependency after all this is done. Like, you definitely don't want that.
You come out the other side. Like, you look at one of the things that we're trying to do in terms of the community, and we've got like a little kind of strength challenge going on the next 10 days for our guys, and that we're kind of doing over WhatsApp. But one of the things is just about having a regular schedule and having things to do, and I think that's one of the things that everybody struggles with. Like, there's all statistics that, you know, you can bounce around with. You can read them anywhere, actually. If you just go Google, like, how many, for example, shift workers are more inclined towards depression and depressive states than people who work a regular 9-to-5 job, because they've got this movable work pattern, and because the hours that they work tend to be socially isolated. So, like, it's something I think, you know, we can joke about the drinking, or we can joke about, like, hey, every day it's the weekend.
It's a serious, it is a serious thing. Like, I think, like, yeah, it's a joke and all that, but I absolutely guarantee you that a lot of people will slip into that, you know. And I suppose not just drink, just, you know, painkillers and all that other shite that you can be using, and understandably so. But geez, you want to keep a close eye on that, you know, during this, because that's one thing you don't want to have at this. Whatever about a little pot belly, you get rid of the little pot belly by going back to grappling.
I can definitely deal with a little roll of fat, all right. But but like, I suppose
turn into a raging alcoholic. That, you know, that's, you know, that could have life-altering consequences on you, you know, on your health and on your relationships.
And there's a lot of guys, I suppose, who use jiu-jitsu and use the training that we do. They use that as their form of therapy. That's how they do.
And they don't have that at the moment, so, you know.
So it's important to take care.
It's difficult, you know. I think the routine, you're talking about, the routine is very important. You know, like, let's say for myself, like, I'm up out of the bed at 8 o'clock every day, make the kids breakfast, do the homework with them, go out for the run, you know, kind of have it structured like a normal day. I think if you don't do that, you're going to very swiftly go downhill. Now, it's a little bit easier for us. Maybe we've kids, we've no choice, we have to do it.
You're out of bed no matter what.
Young lads kind of maybe starting to sleep in later and later. You should be getting up and exercising and trying to keep the booze and anything else kind of to a reasonable, you know, limit. And then, you know, you can, as you come out of this, you can go back to your normal life more seamlessly. You know, because
and I think you touched on it earlier around what you were saying, that motivation for you isn't the big thing. It's about discipline and about habit more than anything.
Line memes. Yeah, I think I'm starting to run low on battery here.
We're starting to lose your battery. Well, we're just about finished anyway, so that's about. I think we've done nearly 2 hours, man. We've certainly done. More. Yeah.
So happens when you're locked down and you've nothing to
do. All right. Well, listen. It's been great talking to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Yeah. Cheers, Barry. Good talk.
For sparing 90 minutes out of your busy schedule and this lockdown.
Squeeze it in there, into the diary.
What day even is it? Is it Wednesday? We said that at the start. It is Wednesday, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I need to be anchored in time a bit more.
Blending into each other now at this stage.
Well, listen, thanks very much indeed, Tom. And look, we'll talk to you soon, and enjoy the rest of your long weekend. Yeah, cheers. I expect an update on that neighbour's tile now. Oh, don't worry. They're coming. That's the new national sport. Keeping an eye. All right, cheers, Barry. Take it easy, Tom. Thanks very much. Right. Talk to you later. Right. Bye.